Brains. Welcome to this episode of What Is She Thinking, where we are getting even more into your brains than we normally do. It is a special Ask a Neuroscientist Anything, and we are lucky to have the wonderful Dr. Heather Collins. Hello.
Hello, my friend. How are you?
I am very excited because I went to viewers, to friends, to listeners of the show to say, what do you want to know that we can just ask Dr. Heather and get answers in a lightning round kind of format ahead of your big trip to South by Southwest? Can we give that a little plug?
South by Southwest. I'll be there for 3 presentations.
Plug. You've got South by Southwest. You're talking about fashion and the brain. Is that right?
I am talking about how fashion affects how we perceive one another and ourselves. I'm talking about related to education, critical thinking in the age of AI. And I am on a panel discussing AI and the future of work with AI, cognitive offloading versus cognitive enhancement.
Okay, so super impressive. And this makes you perfectly qualified to answer all of my very important questions from everyone.
I'm ready. Let's go.
Okay.
Game on.
All right. So now the container is you get maximum 90 seconds. So we are not going on a tour through every part of part Z. I know, because it's parts of the brain working together. Look at me learning. But you got to answer these questions quickly because we got a lot to get through.
All right. My best.
Ready? Okay.
Ready.
Number 1. This is from me. Why do I get my best ideas in the shower?
Oh, this is a fantastic first question. You're not alone. Many of us get our best ideas in the shower, and it's really simple. The simplest explanation is that we're not distracted by anything else. We don't have typically our phones in front of us in the shower. We don't have our laptops there. Typically, there are not other people firing away, asking us demanding questions, and therefore our brains are allowed to engage in mind wandering and daydreaming. And in fact, this taps into your brain's default mode network. And that's kind of this baseline network that's humming along in the background and is active when you're doing nothing else. And so when you're in the shower, this bubbles up to the surface, gets a little bit more activated, and allows you to engage in mind wandering and some creative thinking that you would not otherwise have if you were distracted by everything else.
So get in the shower as much as possible? Is this what we're saying?
Get in the shower as much as possible. Sure. Why not? Why not? Mind your water bills, mind your resources. Don't waste water, but yes.
Okay. So
you could be in a hot tub or a pool too.
All right. Hot tub, pool. Am I getting the same thing when I go for a dog walk? Because I get that when I go for a dog walk. I'm giving you got 20 seconds. Same thing?
Absolutely. And in fact, you have the added bonus of engaging in nature, which also tends to help these creative thought processes and let that default mode network bubble up and do its thing.
Okay, everyone. Default mode network, good. Mind wandering, good.
Check. Mind wandering, phenomenal.
Phenomenal. Okay, number 2. This is from someone who's been having a bit of a hard time with their thoughts. And when I put out the call for questions, they came back with, can I have a new brain?
Oh, well, brain transplants don't work so well for several different reasons. But I'm going to argue that your friend doesn't need a new brain. So the brain that she has or he has or they have is perfectly good. That maybe it's just small shifts that are needed to reorganize and retrain your brain. And it sounds like maybe the problem is some negative thinking, and that negative thinking can come into play when we have these patterns. And we know that when we do something repeatedly, whether that's thinking or doing, those brain cells that are all connected together form pathways, right? And those pathways strengthen from bumpy country roads to freeways. So if you have negative thinking patterns, those can get amplified too, from bumpy country roads to freeways. And the first step is just identifying those negative thoughts. I'm having a negative thought. And then immediately thinking about 3 positive thoughts instead. And also realizing something really, really powerful, and that is you are not your thoughts. You might have negative thoughts, and that's okay. We all have negative thoughts. That doesn't mean we are those thoughts. Acknowledge those thoughts, let them pass like a cloud blowing across the sky, and move on to positive thoughts so that you can retrain your brain.
Okay, that's beautiful. So she doesn't need a new brain. She just needs to build a new freeway of love.
A new freeway of love. I like that.
We going riding on a freeway, oh no, and I can't remember the rest of the words. There are some questions about memory in here, so that will come in handy. Thank you so much. That's a really, I think, powerful answer, because there were a few questions that came in that were of that variety, that were kind of like the what's wrong with me. And I think that answer that highlights that it's not what's wrong with you, it is thinking patterns, and you are not your brain. Oh, that gives me another deep one for later. Okay.
No, I said you are not your thoughts.
You are not your thoughts. Okay, that you
are. I'm going to argue you are your brain, but you're not your thoughts.
Okay. All right. Near-death experiences and consciousness. That's later. That's later on What Is She Thinking? Okay. So next, thank you so much. Great answer, Dr. Heather. How does ancestral and genetic memory work? This is from an older listener, somebody who knows people in the Indigenous communities, and they were curious about how does ancestral and genetic memory work, things that are passed down from other generations.
Well, I would love to be able to probe more deeply into this question by understanding what the asker means by this. Mm-hmm. A quick response there. There are a couple of different things that are going on here. And one of those things is actually that experiences can alter our genetic expression. So when we have certain kinds of experiences that actually alters our genetic expression, and then that can get passed down to other generations. So the simple example of that is, let's say there's a pregnant woman who is very stressed, or a woman who has had a very, very stressful experience. Well, that can actually alter some of how her genes are expressed, and then those alterations can get passed down biologically to the next generation. And so it can change our expression. It can change our epigenetics, which is how our genes look and how they are responding to the outside world. Another thing is that as generations move on, stories are told, experiences are told, and those experiences and stories then can become memories for younger generations. And even if your great grandmother tells you a story about something that happened to her when she was a teenager, well, that's her memory, but she's passing it down to you. And you don't have that memory of that experience yourself, but you have the memory of your grandmother telling you that story, and certainly of that story itself. So those are 2 ways that can happen.
And when somebody tells you their memory with strong emotion, does that get attached to strong emotion for you?
It could, yeah, depending on how you're receiving it. Typically when somebody is interacting with you, because we're humans, we affect each other. So if you're telling me a story and you're very excited about it, that emotion is going to be a little bit contagious, and I'm more likely to get very excited about it. But it is possible that some experience I'm sharing with you, I'm really, really excited or really sad about it, but you might not feel exactly the same.
So would the genetic, so using the stressor example, because I think where it came from is that obviously in Canada, we have a pretty horrible history of how we treated our First Nations, where people were taken from their families, sent off to residential schools, and that went on for a long time. So a lot of trauma that people were under, so stress. And I think if that's passed down as high stress in the genes, does that affect brains?
Yeah, stress affects your brain.
Yeah. Well,
Yes,
that's a question. Yeah. Like,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And so you know by now, probably we've talked about this a lot. The primary stress hormone is cortisol, and
Mhm.
cortisol is released by your adrenal glands, can flood your brain in times of stress, and that actually does it does a doozy to your brain. It's so it can actually decrease your hippocampus's ability to remember information. It can affect how your prefrontal cortex engages in decision making, thinking, problem solving, reasoning, all those things you need in order to sort of get your life together, be successful, and make good choices in life.
You have to
Additionally,
be
that
careful.
stress actually affects you genetically too. So it actually shreds telomeres on your genes. So it actually shreds you at the cellular level, which shortens your lifespan.
Okay, so we have to do a show on this one. I'm just putting a little check mark here. I'm putting check mark and some stars. We're doing a show on this one. Okay, here's one. Here's a personal question from a viewer for you.
Ooh.
What is one thing that you do to get yourself in peak performance mode?
Oh, well, as you know, when I'm keynoting, peak performance is one of my favorite topics that I share with people. And so, one thing I do to get myself in peak performance mode is actually to wake up my brain. I have a little routine. So, I do some physical activity because you need to get your blood pumping. Blood pumping actually sends oxygen to your brain, which is great. I eat a little something sweet. So, research shows that eating a little something sweet 15 to 30 minutes before you engage in a cognitively heavy task will actually help you perform better because glucose is your brain's fuel. That's what it runs on. So just a little something sweet can help. And I make sure I'm caffeinated, but not overly caffeinated because caffeine does aid in your cognitive performance. But if you have too much, then you get jittery. And yeah, nobody wants that. So that's a routine I do. Now, when it comes to getting myself in peak performance and maybe right before I'm about to go on stage for a keynote, another thing I do is I pick a song that matches my vibe and I dance to it. And usually that's backstage, but I do. And the reason for that is actually to take that cortisol before you're expected to have peak performance. You're going to you're going to have some cortisol. You're going to have a little stress. That's okay. And it's to manage it. And it's to get it from up here to down here. And as you know, I grew up as a dancer. So dancing for me does it. And it's always Madonna. And a lot of times it's the song Jump.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. Such a good song. I would put it on, but then we get stricken for copyright. I don't want that to happen. I love that. Anything else? This is such a good answer. I love this. This is really top practical tips. So I know people are going to love this.
Anything else? Yeah. Right before you're about to do something that requires that peak performance, whether it's a meeting, you're going on stage, you're just having a different conversation, you've danced, you've done all the other things, take a moment and just breathe. And I take 5 deep breaths. And just like dancing reduces my cortisol levels, that actually balances my sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems and gets me in the right biological zone to perform cognitively.
Love it. Thank you so much. All right, guys, perform like Dr. Heather. That's how you get your brain ticking properly. I love all of those. And I love that song too. Okay, here's one. This is a bit of a news from anyone. What's the deal with aphantasia? So you will need to say what it is and
What's the
explain
deal with aphantasia?
what the deal
Actually, if you would tell us a little bit about your story with aphantasia, I'll riff off that because this is how you and I got started talking about this.
Okay, I have a viewer and a listener who's a very close friend of mine who it turns out like can't imagine things, can't see things in their brain, right? Is that how we're describing it?
Yeah, that's
And
fair. Absolutely.
so, which is weird to me because I visualize entire films in my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this person wanted to ask you, what's the deal? This was the exact phrasing with aphantasia.
What's the
Because
deal with
they have
aphantasia?
it, and
Aphantasia is
they didn't even know they
fascinating.
had it, by the way. They didn't even know they had it because that was their brain.
This is an entire show, Mel, but this
Okay.
is fascinating because I'm fascinated with the fact that you know not just one person but several people with this.
Yeah, I know 3 people in a cluster.
Yes, something's happening with aphantasia in that area, and it's fascinating. And it is that essentially a lack of ability to visualize or visually imagine something. And so it's very, very rare. I've actually never met one of these people in person. So when I visit you, we're going to hang out with your friends who have aphantasia for sure. This is going to be fascinating. And it's really, really rare. Like, I don't know, 1% of the population, something like that. And essentially your occipital lobe back here, major real estate taken up in your brain, is responsible for visual processing. And so visual processing in a couple of different ways. So that means your eyes, right? Take in information, big optic nerve, everything goes to the back of your brain. And your friend with aphantasia sees just fine, right? No problems actually seeing.
Yeah, they see.
Well, don't we all? So there's not a problem with actually seeing things there, but this is also the part of the brain that's responsible for visualization and imagination. And in aphantasia, it just doesn't do that. It just doesn't do that. And because this is so rare, that there really aren't research studies looking at 35, 40, 50 people with aphantasia in their brains. But yet, if anybody wants to sponsor that study, I will run it. It would be amazing. What I hypothesize is going on is this has actually been allocated to something else. So this happens also with people who have visual impairment and are blind, that this part of the brain it's there, it's active, and it works just fine. It gets allocated to something else. So that could be spatial processing, that could be other kinds
of verbal or words. This person is like a genius with words.
Now, I'm not sure, language is very specifically defined in our brains.
So we're doing a whole show, basically. We're doing a whole show.
We're doing a whole show. Now, okay. I would guess this person's really, really good with words, because typically the 2 ways we process information are visual and verbal, and they don't have a lot of visual processing ability, not as much. It's more literal than imaginative. So they use words.
Yeah.
And so they're very expert at using words. And this is a very strong suit for them, because this is their strength and this is what they can play to.
Ever play boggle or bananagrams with this person? I'm just telling you that right now. That's not, I'm breaking out of the box a little of the Ask a Neuroscientist anything, which will come to my questions, but never do that. Well, let's do a real show. We're going to get them on, and you're going to give me a magnetic wand. I'm going to wand their brain. It's going to be great. I know. We're not going to do that. Okay. All right. Thank you. Excellent answer. Okay. Here is one. It's sort of a compilation question, because I got it from kind of a number of middle-aged folks, and it's about memory. So somebody I know has, so I'm trying to kind of anonymize this a little bit, feels that they keep being told that they were told stuff. And they don't remember that. And that's being weaponized a bit against them by the younger generation. So, well, I told you that, and so then they're like, oh my gosh, like, what is happening? And I think for a lot of people who reach a certain age, not in a glamorous French way, but in a like middle-aged North American way, there is this, what is happening? Am I losing my memory already? Or like, is this dementia? Or are teenagers just me? So they're getting this thing where they're being told, that they were told where the kid was going. They were told, they're forgetting all these events or timelines. and they're wondering what's going on, what's happening to my memory that I'm not remembering stuff like this.
I mean, this is a buffet of a lot of things you just mentioned. This is a whole buffet of explanations. So first of all, yeah, teenagers can be mean, so that might be part of it. Now, here's the thing. We talked about before how the human brain, especially the prefrontal cortex, doesn't fully form until you're mid-20s, right? Plus or minus, depending on the individual. Then you have this like beautiful, miraculous 5 years of this healthy, wonderful, like peak performance top brain. And then when you're 30, it starts slipping. It starts decreasing a little bit. No, it's just a little bit, just a little bit every year. When we hit around the age of 60, 65, then that slope starts to decrease more significantly. And so we do start to see things like a little bit of shrinkage in the brain, and hippocampus, responsible for memory, prefrontal cortex, also involved in forming memories around context and stories and things like that. So around the age of 60 or so, it's completely normal to start to see some memory slippage. And that's normal. That's okay. That's totally fine. Now, there's some other things that come into play too. So for women in particular that are premenopausal or menopausal, we're going to see some hormonal changes that can affect that also. And I get a lot of questions about menopause brains. Certainly HRT and some other things can help with that.
What is happening with menopause brain? What's menopause brain?
Girl, that's a whole episode.
Okay, give it to me. You got to give it to me in 30 seconds, 45 seconds.
The 30-second version of it is it's a massive change in hormones that means that your brain is not able to work the way it used to work and has to readjust.
And so that doesn't mean that somebody is losing it or is less smart than they used to be, or that their teenage daughters are correct.
Well, it might be that your memory is slightly impaired. You're not able to think as clearly. You do have some cognitive slowing when it comes to thinking. And you know what? If a teenage person is being mean about it, I already told you, just respond to them. Well, tell me again and don't be mean.
Okay, honestly,
because for a teenager to expect that a middle-aged person is going to have a brain that works the same way is ridiculous. So part of communicating with one another is having respect for where our brains are at and understanding how to best actually reach that person and get the information we need to them and get the information we need out of them.
I adore you, but I do feel like, have you been with a teenager lately? Like, that's not how their brains work.
It's not. But if you constantly tell them, yeah, tell me again and don't be mean, they're going to get the drip that they might have to say something 3 or 4 times. And this is no shock if we've talked with older adults.
I know, and I know how we've done, and there's some beautiful stuff about that. I'm writing down menopause brain and teenage brain as other ideas. Okay, here's another one. Lightning round. This was a practical one. How can I be 10% smarter immediately?
Put your phone down. Next.
Really?
Here's the deal. This little baby, as much as we love them, there are several problems with them. Number one, they're as addictive as crack. And therefore, that creates an unhealthy relationship with it. Number two, they distract us. Number three, along with the addiction principle, a lot of what we use them for is social media. And social media, as we have discussed, super addictive. And so you're really just a rat pressing a lever at that point. You're not actually engaging in deep thinking, which is probably what your person means by being smarter. And they encourage multitasking. And if you want to increase your memory and cognitive capacity by 40%, at least immediately, don't multitask.
Okay, so put your phone down, don't multitask. Nice. Yeah, you went for 40. All right, fine. I was only going for 10 with that one. Okay, here's another one. Why can't my friend ever be on time?
who's asking this question, Melanie.
All of my friends.
Some people we know have challenging relationships with time. And I want to assure your friend that actually estimating how long something will take is really difficult for all humans. So this involves several brain regions. I mean, you're getting the hint that prefrontal cortex and frontal lobes are involved in a lot, but it also involves things like we haven't talked about before, like your basal ganglia, which is involved in estimating duration of things. There's a little bit of cerebellum thrown in there. There's some other flavors thrown in there, but basically time management is really difficult for people. And if you ask somebody, there have been research studies that show that if you ask somebody how long something is going to take, reliably, they underestimate it. And you'll see that, for example, people in the military are really good with showing up on time. And that's because they've trained themselves to do that and overcome that. So some people are just more sensitive to this effect than others, but you can retrain your brain to be better about being on time if you want to, if your friend wants to.
The friend. But what if you're really bad? Like, what if your friend is like genuinely seems more challenged than other people? Does that mean their basal ganglia are broken?
Oh, no. If it was broken, you would have basic problems functioning. But it means that your basal ganglia maybe is activating in a different pattern or a different way or a little less active than some other people. And so the way to help retrain that is to actually use some external cues to help you. Set timers, have other friends help remind you and prompt you and cue you. You don't want to beat yourself up too much if you're late or something like that, but you do, because beating yourself up just leads to a whole cascade of negative things happening in your brain. But you do want to let yourself know that didn't work. What can I do next time to make that work better? And put some external systems in place to help you.
So external systems, timers would be your top tip?
Timers would be my top tip. So if you allowed yourself an hour to get ready for something and that didn't work, maybe you allow yourself an hour and 15 minutes next time.
Okay. All right. We might be doing a whole thing on time blindness. I'll be telling you that much for a friend.
Oh, the brain's perception of time and how it processes time is fascinating.
And okay. Lightning round. See? Difficult. Okay. Here's one that I don't know if I even understand the question. So let's see if you do. So I wrote it down word for word. Is human data stored in the brain in 3 or more dimensions? Is it holographic?
Well, holographic in a sense is an artificial technology. So I'm going to say no, it's not holographic. Human data is stored in the brain we call it actually 4 dimensions.
Okay.
So we have like when we do brain imaging studies, fMRI in particular. So when we're looking at how the brain, not just the structures that are there, that would be 3 dimensions, but how the brain reacts to something. So I'm talking with you right now. How does my brain process that social interaction? We have 4 dimensions. So X, Y, Z are the 3, right? So just like a plane, this, and this dimension. Mm-hmm. And then also the 4th dimension is time. Because anytime we're engaging in something, our activation levels in our brain shift on the order of milliseconds. And so we can measure that little bit abstractly, but we can measure that roughly with fMRI studies and looking at oxygenation of the brain across time. So it's stored that way. I would argue actually another dimension. The X, Y, and Z capture what we're thinking of as space, because it gives us coordinates in the brain for space and how something is spatially laid out. So the short answer is it's stored using space and time.
What was the extra? You were going to say something that this person would probably love, because I feel they've read a lot of books. What you were going to say? You would argue there's another.
Well, no, I was going to say space, but really space is X, Y, and Z.
Okay, so but does that mean that there is like one cell in my brain that has my memory of like petting a giraffe and you know where it is?
So, do you remember the experience of petting the giraffe?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have that time dimension where when you think about it, you're replaying the story, and you can think of that one cell as like it's firing, it's firing, it's firing, it's not firing, it's firing, it's firing, it's not firing, it's firing
Mhm.
across a period of like 10 seconds, except it's not just one cell. So that's a really complex memory that probably involves not just one little baby neuron. And again, neurons are so small, we can't see them with the naked eye.
Okay.
So it would probably involve hundreds of thousands of neurons, maybe millions of neurons,
But could you go in there and zap them?
spread across your brain.
Huh.
The only
Maybe this is
way
where this question came from, is that
the
they were
only
asking.
way we can zap all of those, because I can't tell which neurons are being activated until I put you in an MRI scanner and scan your brain while that's happening and get a video of it, a record of it. So the only way we could zap those neurons would be the single way to zap all neurons, which is electrical stimulation. So we don't want to do that. It's one of my favorite neuroscience professors said that he found that essentially shock therapy is one of the most offensive things he's ever heard of, because your brain is not designed or built to have every single neuron firing at the same time. And that's what that does. So we can't zap all of those at the same time unless we do that. We wouldn't want to zap all of them at the same time. There'd be no purpose for that.
Okay, so well, I'm just curious, like if that's my question is because when this question, which I didn't totally understand until you started answering it, I was like, is this question basically like, could you see in my brain a certain memory?
Yes,
Is that what that question is?
if we scan you and ask you to recall that memory while we're scanning you. I was wondering if this person was getting at, can we reproduce an artificial visualization of that memory as a hologram? Sort of like in
Don't
Star
think,
Wars, how
yeah.
Princess Leia is being projected, but a brain version. In
Oh
the
yeah,
answer,
they probably were getting at that, by the way, because they're really smart and they read a lot of books, like a lot of
and the
science books.
answer
And
for that is no.
why
However,
not?
the brain computer interface advancement is rapid. And we do already have the ability to insert chips in our brains and have them interface with our brains. And just as computers are based on electrical stimulation to function, our brains are electrochemical. So the day is coming when brains and computer chips interface in a much more complex way.
Well,
That might be another episode.
okay.
There's some wild things
That
happening.
no, okay, brains and computers. Yeah, all right. Yeah, that's probably what they meant. See, I should have just asked you to explain the question first. Um, I
I'm
know
guessing. I don't know for sure
no,
what
this
that
person
person was
reads a lot of
asking.
physics. This person reads a lot of computer books. This person reads a lot, like they read a lot of science. So that's probably what they meant. But then my question was about dreams. So I, so like I would love it if you could like make a projector showed my dreams. Could you make a projector? Is that a ways off?
Would
But
you, or would that be terrifying?
my dreams are amazing.
My
So,
dreams are terrifying or
oh, well,
disconcerting.
but I also think dreams are incredible, right? Because they operate in such a different way than the laws of normal like existence. So, this might be a whole episode, but it's lightning round. I am going to take this as second last question. What is the purpose and
So what is the purpose of dreams and why do we dream? The why is interesting,
Yeah.
that's a question that would get to the evolutionary purpose of dreams, and that's it's not really a research based question, it's more hypothetical. So the bottom line is your brain has to do something while it's sleeping. The brain doesn't get turned off. The brain only turns off once, and that's when we're dead. So even while we're sleeping, things are happening. And so while we're sleeping, what's happening that creates dreams is that we go through a lot during the day. There's a lot happening. And at the end of the day, some of that catches up with us. And there are a lot of leftovers in your brain from what's happening during the day. And sometimes we don't get a chance to tackle those things during the day, and they kind of like continue through our brain until we reach the night, and there are all these leftover things happening. And typically when we're dreaming, our brain is essentially kind of weaving together stories and making sense of those activations that are already bubbling in your brain from the leftovers of the day.
I'm not sure that explains this kind of cool haunted house I was in last night, but it wasn't scary. But anyway, okay, I'm going to make a whole episode on that. I feel like you're bored with my dreams questions. Okay, last question will make memory. This comes from a speaker that you and I both know. They want to know this is memory. Why do their friend and them remember or not remember the same events from childhood? They experience the same event.
Yeah, this is a great question. So this really applies to all of us, and not just childhood, but any age, that you and I could be the same place and have the same experience, and maybe you'd remember it very well, and I just wouldn't remember it. So it could be that there were different emotional states at the time. One person was really into it, the other person wasn't. And as we know, memory and emotion are neighbors in the brain, the hippocampus and amygdala. So if it's an emotional memory, that might have triggered it to be more encoded in the brain and last longer for one person. It could be that if one person was stressed, there was a lot of cortisol there, and we know that's going to impair your memory ability, so they wouldn't be able to remember it as well. It could be that one person tells that story a lot. Do you remember when we were kids and we went bicycling down to the river and I tripped and scraped my knee up and there was blood everywhere? So it could be that one person tells the story more. And the more you tell a story, the more that those brain networks involved in that story turn from bumpy country roads to freeways. They become stronger memories. It could be because something after that was a bigger memory happened to one person. And so they don't think of this little thing that happened where their friend bloodied their knee but down by the river when they were kids. They think of right after that, they went home and found out that their grandfather died.
Mm.
And so that can essentially your brain prioritizes resources toward the most important thing. And a grandparent dying would surpass that experience down by the river. So those are just a few explanations of what could be going on there.
That's so cool. And I think that gives us just some insight into, in a very fast way, well done, Dr. Heather, into what it is that sometimes affects how we remember. So I think that's fantastic. Thank you so much. How has this been for you?
This has been so much fun. I could go for another 2 hours.
Woo! Okay. Well, great. We're going to. No.
Surprise! We have a 5-hour episode for you.
Exactly. We are going to do this again because we do have more questions. And folks, if you have more questions, drop them in the comments. We're going to get to them or we'll pick them up in a future episode. If you like what we're doing, follow, subscribe. We love hearing from you, and we are open to brand partnerships, sponsorships, all of those things. Dr. Heather is going to be at South by Southwest, so you can take the opportunity to meet her if you are there.
Yes, reach out, get in contact. I'd love to meet with all of you.
And until then, what is she
thinking?
Thanks, folks.